Hello, hello, and welcome to episode number 2 of your first book podcast. Today, we are going to talk about what to do when your first draft feels impossible, some reasons why you might feel this way, and what you can do about it. This episode will be incredibly relevant to you, especially if you are someone who has dreams of publishing your first fiction novel. So, reason number one why your first draft might feel impossible to finish is that you are putting too much pressure on the first draft. So, what I mean by this is you are thinking way ahead. You probably have ambitious dreams of writing your first fiction novel. First off, congratulations. And you know that this is just the beginning stages of a product that you intend to publish. Well, while this is extremely exciting, can you imagine if all published products we saw were someone's first draft? Can you imagine like the panic that would instill if you knew that finishing this was it's done and then it's going to publication and there were no steps in between? Like, I know logically we know the first draft is not the published product, but because we are thinking of that end result, that fiction novel at the end, it's very exciting or it's very scary for this first draft to be such a daunting task. And the first draft is supposed to be the messiest draft of them all. If you haven't, I highly recommend the article Shitty First Drafts. I forget the name of the author right now. I have a name in my head, but it might be wrong. But just look up Shitty First Drafts, find that article, read it. It will give you less stress. Reason number two why it might feel impossible that to finish your first draft is because you have no idea how to start, where your story is even going. And if that's you, like that's totally common to be in those stages. And in the writing community, writers are divided between what we call plotters and pantsers. So pantsers are those who just open the page, see what happens, maybe the story will come to them. And then plotters are a little more what it sounds like. They are those who have a meticulous outline planned out before they even start working on their first draft so they can follow their outline. And while this is helpful initially to determine what your writing style might be, I think this way of categorizing writing styles is somewhat rigid. And when I speak to other writers, I personally believe most people fall somewhere in the middle. Like to begin a story, to begin a first draft, we all have to brainstorm, right? We need to brainstorm our characters, the world, even if it's just inklings of an idea and not a full on outline. But we would also prefer a skeleton of what our final product might look like so that we can see where we're going. And this is kind of how I operate. I would love to chat to you about your writing style. Feel free to follow me on Instagram at author Christine Elise and send me a message. Just let me know how your first draft is going. And if you are sitting down to write just streams of consciousness, but haven't even thought about who your potential main characters may be yet, then yeah, the thought of finishing your first draft is going to be very, very difficult. But I just want to pause and take a moment to shout out those people that are like, Christina, no, I've started my first draft. I just can't finish it. Like I have maybe 30% of it done and I just don't see the end in sight. Again, totally normal. If you're in that stage where maybe just pantsing and writing random ideas out isn't working for you, maybe that's time to go back, take a piece of paper and draw out a character map. You can always flip between this plotting and pantsing style. It doesn't have to be you were just one or the other. And if you've never actually finished a first draft before, like if this is your first draft that you're going into with the intentions of finishing your first fiction novel, this thing probably feels like a beast. Like, how many pages is your genre supposed to be even? So, if this is your first draft with serious intentions of publishing, yeah, it might feel impossible, but It's not. You can do it, and we will get to that at the end of this episode. And reason number 4 why your first draft might feel impossible for you is that you feel like you don't know enough about writing to begin, even if you've read a ton of resources up to this point. Maybe you're participating in NaNoWriMo, so you've read Save the Cat, you've watched your favorite writing videos on YouTube, you've been told why theme is important, and you've read about how characters need to exhibit change in a good story, yet there are still a million books out there, a million fantastic books out there on writing craft that you can read to improve your writing craft. It's very easy to feel like you are not caught up in knowing enough about writing. And I personally find this has hindered me at times from working on my own writing script because I want to consume more content about the craft of writing itself. Reason number 5 why this first draft might feel impossible to finish is that you're not sure if your story is good enough. Will people even like it? You've never published anything before. How do you know how people are going to react to it? You haven't had feedback yet. All the doubts that come in for this first draft, chances are you're going to go through at least 3 drafts minimum, right? But a lot of like little iterations beyond that 3 drafts as well. But if while you're writing the first draft and you're having those doubts of, I don't know if this is good enough, that thought is going to prevent you from finishing the draft itself. If you think your story is good enough, if you are writing the book that you would love to read, I'm giving you permission, a permission slip right now to just keep writing that first draft. Because even if, hear me out, even if you don't think the story on your first draft is good enough, many people aren't even going to see that first draft. And that first draft is going to look very different than your final product, but you need a first draft to get to a final draft. So I have 2 more reasons I want to share with you why you're finishing your first draft might feel impossible. And I really would love to hear if any of these resonate for you. So if you're watching this on YouTube, comment below. If you're listening to the podcast, come and find me on Instagram. But I would really love to chat this out because I do think the first draft is scary, especially if you've never done it before, right? So reason number 6 is that the blank page is really scary. The fear of the blank page. If you Google this, you'll see a ton of things come up. The fear of the blank page is not a new concept. It's something that many writers experience. And it's basically just the fear of even opening our document today to sit down for our writing time, because what if we open it and we can't produce anything? Like that would be terrible. We want to write, but what if we open it and we're just paralyzed with the inability to write? So that causes us to not even open our Word document, Scrivener document, Google Docs document, whatever it is, and then we don't write at all because the blank page is scary. I do have a video on my YouTube channel called First Draft Lessons. I recommend you check this out if you are liking this episode. And let's go to reason number 7 for why your first draft might feel impossible. So this reason is, I'm going to, before I share this reason, I'm just going to preface something that I hear all the time is that if you want to write the book, you will get it done. No one else can write the book for you. I truly believe it. It's true. And then people will often share, like, if you have the time or if you don't have the time, you can write on your phone. Like if you have any downtime, just open your phone. You can write the book. You can write a chapter. You can write a scene. If you're commuting to get to a full-time job during your commute, you can write the book. And I agree with this sentiment of like, we can write it at any time, especially if we really want it. There has to be some pockets of time that we can find. But I do really think that the space that we're in, like the physical office space or whatever it is, matters, especially for something like writing a fiction book. I would argue that this space matters more than, say, if you were writing an essay. Just because I know to get into that zone of like this world that we've built up in our heads of characters and plot and everything magical and exciting that you like about writing your story, you can't just go there immediately. Like it's very hard to just sit in the chair and go there. I know for me, I like to get in the zone. I like to play like a specific type of music. I like to close my eyes and see if I can visualize a scene. Like I probably spend at least half an hour getting into that creative zone before I'm actually writing. And it's hard to do that if you are out in public. So if you haven't like curated a great writing space or just a great pre-writing routine, it might be hard to get in the zone of just getting some scenes or getting some chapters out. And like, I feel kind of hypocritical as I say this, because right now this is my writing space. There's no, it's very boring right now. I'm working on improving that. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see there's no decorations here. If you're listening to this on the podcast, like all you can see is me, my face, my microphone, and just white walls. Like there's no, this almost looks like a pre-made Zoom background. There is no personality here, but I know that this is my little zone. I know this is where I can put my headphones on, listen to the lo-fi music, get in the zone of my characters. I have a desk where I can scribble handwritten notes. And so whatever your situation is, like even if you don't have an office at home, maybe you have a table and you can just curate that space with some handwritten notes or choose what type of music to listen to. Like I really do think that the space that you perform your writing in matters. So take some time just to think about your pre-writing routine and the physical space where you are working on your fiction novel. And also keep coming back to the podcast. I am aiming to get this having more personality in the future so that I can follow my own advice. Something else that I also like to add for my pre-writing routine, especially as the temperature gets more cold where I live, is to make a cup of warm peppermint tea. Like it just feels very cozy. It feels creative. My fiction novel has some elements of magic in it and it has tea. So it's very chai tea more so than peppermint, but it's very fitting that I would be drinking tea while working on this magical story. Something I've heard other authors mention is scents. So if there's a specific candle you want to light every time you write, or if you want to wear a specific perfume every time you write, this actually helps us recall certain memories. So get creative and do what you can to create that pre-writing routine and developing your writing space with what you currently have. Okay, so let's talk about what you can do about each of these things that may be causing finishing your first draft to feel like it is an impossible task. First off, if you are putting way too much pressure on your first draft, aka the start of a published fiction novel, I want you to, one, read the article's shitty first drafts, remind yourself that this is not the final product and that this part in the writing process is actually the lowest stakes thing you can do as a future published author. So I invite you to have fun with writing your first draft and be surprised with what you create. The second thing that you can do is that if you have no idea how to start or where your story is even going, or if you're a plotter, if you're a pantser, all those things we talked about, is sit down and create a mind map. This can look like a blank piece of paper and a pen and just drawing out character names. If you don't know names, character A, character B, their love interest. So and so is the enemy. So and so has a secret about this character. Even if you don't know what your story is yet, just start drawing a mind map. If you are not a pen and paper person, I invite you to open Google Drive and make a characters folder, make a setting folder, make a a bio sheet for each character. Just start with something, anything that you need to brainstorm this first draft. The third thing that you can do, especially if you've never finished a first draft before and this thing feels like a beast, is if it helps, do just some research on your chosen genre conventions. So, what I mean by this, if you've chosen to write a romance, quickly do a Google search like romance reader expectations, romance genre conventions, read that list, write down some notes from that list, and maybe write down your expected word counts just so you know you have a framework to work around, but only spend like 30 minutes tops in this research stage. Find some parameters that you want to work around and get writing. The next thing that you can do, especially if you are someone that feels like you haven't read all the writing books, you don't know enough about writing yet, is that, well, honestly, I'm going to say with this one, there are so many fantastic writing craft books out there that I could continue to recommend for days. And for this one, I'm just going to share my personal experience is that I am working on finding my own balance between reading craft books and actually writing. And what I found helpful this week is because I'm still learning a lot and I don't want to ditch the writing craft books. Like they're so valuable. I feel like I'm just giving myself this fantastic education. Is that instead of reading like a writing craft book all in one go and saying like, wow, I just absorbed all this information. That's great. I've started reading 1 to 2 chapters at a time. And then during my next writing session, I started challenging myself to implement what I've learned for those 2 chapters. So this is for you. If you are currently in the stage of binging writing book resources, next time I challenge you to stop at 2 chapters and see if you can implement what you just learned for your next writing session. The next thing that you can do, especially if you feel like your story isn't good enough or people even going to read it, well, this one's simple. Is your story good enough for you? Would you want to read this book? If so, then just keep writing it. This is your first draft. Now is not the time to get hung up on what your ideal reader looks like. Like if this is a book you feel you would pick up off the shelf, like what you're envisioning it to be, just keep writing. Let's go to the next one. So the next one we talked about was that the fear of the blank page. It's really scary, right? You don't even want to open your document. So to combat this, the first thing I want you to do is remind yourself that the fear of the blank page is normal. Open your Word doc, even if you're scared of it today, even if you're like, I am not in a mood, I can't produce anything. Even if you open it and you write something silly, like, I have no idea what my main character is going to get up to today. And then you can go off on a tangent. Don't worry about fancy prose or coming up with an incredible scene. Just start by writing something, anything, because that's going to help you build the habit of just sitting down and trying to write on your manuscript. And the final thing that I want you to think about is, like we spoke about earlier, start thinking about what elements you want to have for your pre-writing routine, whether that's music, whether that's snacks, whether that's a beverage. And then also, how can you create a space that will help boost your creativity for this awesome fiction novel that you will eventually put out into the world? So I would love to hear which one of these or how many of these you plan on trying this week. Please connect with me on Instagram, share with me what you thought of this episode, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can comment below in the comments and we can have a conversation. I am wishing you so much luck on finishing your first draft, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.